A gold Cartier, slim and gleaming, catching the candlelight every time she moved her wrist. I'd seen it before, in the window of a boutique on Fifth Avenue. Back then, she pressed her hand against the glass and whispered, "Someday." Now it was on her wrist, a gift from someone else. We were sitting in a quiet corner of a Manhattan rooftop restaurant, the kind that smells faintly of truffle oil and money. The skyline shimmered behind her, 1,000 tiny promises reflected in the glass walls. She looked like she belonged there, polished, composed, rehearsed. "You've been wonderful," she said, her voice perfectly level. "Really, but I think we want different things." There it was, different things. The cleanest phrase to end a life. I didn't argue. I just let the words hang in the air between us, somewhere above the untouched plates and the half-finished martini sweating in front of her. A few months ago, we would have been joking about the overpriced menu or sharing a dessert, the way we used to on quiet nights in our Brooklyn apartment, her in my t-shirt, me trying to keep the smoke alarm from going off while she laughed. Now her laughter belonged to someone else's circle, someone with better wine and whiter teeth. She touched her earring, a tiny diamond that caught the light like it had something to prove. It didn't match the girl who once saved up coupons for groceries. It matched the version of her the city rewarded. "I just feel like I've outgrown this," she said softly. "I need to be around people who push me. You understand that, right?" Her words were sharp, trimmed of all warmth. The way an executive ends a meeting that's gone on too long. Her phone buzzed once. A name she didn't want me to see. She flipped it over. Too slow. Her thumb trembled, barely. When the waiter came, she was the one who reached for the check. A platinum card, gleaming in her manicured hand. "I'll take care of it," she said. That was the moment, the quiet betrayal dressed as independence. Paying for goodbye with a stranger's money. Turning the end of us into another transaction. I wanted to say something, anything, but the city outside was too loud. Car horns, laughter, a siren somewhere far below. Her new world was moving too fast for me to keep up. When she stood, she didn't wait. The valet already had a black car waiting, door open, driver in a suit. She slid in smoothly, like she'd done it 100 times before. I stayed where I was, under the string lights, watching her reflection vanish in the glass door. The gold of her watch flashed one last time before it disappeared into traffic. Somewhere below, a bus exhaled, brakes hissing. A church bell struck 9. The sound barely reached the rooftop. Inside my pocket, I found the receipt, her name signed at the bottom, looping and perfect. It smelled faintly of her perfume and champagne. Maybe that's how love dies here. Not in a storm, not in fire. Just in the quiet, controlled sound of a glass emptying. The first few mornings after she left were too quiet. Our Brooklyn apartment felt like a stage after the actors had gone home. The coffee pot still worked, but I kept forgetting to brew more than one cup. Her hairbrush sat on the counter. I didn't touch it. The bristles caught the light when the sun came through the blinds, small silver needles of memory. The city didn't care, of course. It never does. Outside my window, delivery trucks backed up. Neighbors argued about parking spots. Life kept its rhythm. But inside, time stuttered. Every sound felt stretched. The hum of the fridge, the faint buzz of the radiator, the click of the hallway light. She had moved into a condo downtown. I knew from the photos. They appeared fast, almost proudly. The kind of pictures that tried too hard to prove happiness. Rooftop views, champagne flutes, mirrored elevators. She looked radiant in every one. Maybe she was. Or maybe she was just lit well. I didn't unfollow her. I wanted to see it, the transformation, the performance. It helped me understand what I'd lost, and what she'd gained. Her new circle looked like an ad campaign. Men in fitted suits, women who smiled with their eyes closed. Every caption had the same rhythm, grateful, blessed, unstoppable. At night, I stayed late at the office. My coworkers thought I was being productive. I wasn't. I just didn't want to go home to the silence. I started walking everywhere, long, aimless walks through the city. Past the restaurants we used to love, past the boutiques she once only looked at. Now her name was probably on their mailing list. One evening, I found myself outside her new building. A glass tower that caught the last of the sunset and reflected it back like a mirror. Through the lobby window, I saw a concierge in a navy suit hand her a package. She smiled, that same perfect smile, and for a second, it was like watching a stranger use her face. I didn't go in. I just stood there until a cab's headlights caught me and broke the moment apart. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table. The old one with the uneven leg she always meant to fix. I made tea instead of coffee. It was weaker, but quieter. Somewhere between sips, the confusion began to thin. The anger, too. What replaced them wasn't peace. Not yet, but understanding. She hadn't betrayed me for another person. She'd traded something real for something shiny. And for the first time, I realized I didn't envy her. Pitied her. I looked around the apartment again. The walls were bare, but they were mine. The silence, too. It no longer felt like loss. Felt like space. Outside, a siren wailed and faded into the night. I closed my eyes, listening, not to her echo, but to the faint hum of my own calm returning. Time didn't heal anything. It only clarified the picture. By the end of summer, her name stopped showing up on my phone. The messages we once sent, the grocery lists, the inside jokes, the half-asleep "you up?" texts, drifted deeper into the archives of my mind until they felt like scenes from another person's life. I didn't delete them. I didn't need to. They'd already lost their weight. Work became my shelter. I switched projects, took on the kind of clients everyone else avoided, demanding, unpredictable but consuming. It helped. Every contract signed, every small victory rebuilt a piece of ground beneath me. The apartment changed slowly. I replaced the couch, repainted the walls, moved the bed to the opposite corner. I didn't want to erase her. I just needed to stop tripping over the ghosts of what we used to be. The gold watch, her symbol, not mine, stayed in my mind like background noise. I began to see it less as what I'd lost and more as what she was chained to. Sometimes, after long days, I'd walk by the river, near the promenade she used to love. Across the water, the skyline shimmered, expensive, unreachable, hollow. I caught myself thinking, that's her world now, a world of champagne glasses and surface conversations. Through a mutual acquaintance, I'd hear fragments about her life, the new job in PR, the charity galas, the photo shoots she attended as someone's plus one. On paper, she was doing well, but every story ended with the same faint note. Exhaustion, small debts, tension around the edges. I didn't smile when I heard it. I didn't need to. My revenge, if you could call it that, was quieter. I started saving. Every extra dollar went into a side fund, a project I'd been sketching for years but never had time or courage for. A small design firm of my own, built on honest work and zero pretense. It wasn't glamorous, but it was clean. By late fall, I signed the lease on a modest office space in downtown Brooklyn, brick walls, good light, nothing fancy. It smelled faintly of sawdust and new beginnings. The first client walked in 2 weeks later, and when I handed them the contract, I realized something strange. My hands didn't shake anymore. Meanwhile, her life glittered on social media. Black-tie dinners, designer collaborations, a weekend in Miami that looked borrowed rather than earned. I could read the fatigue behind her smile now. It was all angles, all performance. She'd won the world she wanted, but she had to keep proving it existed. One evening, out of curiosity, I looked up the restaurant where she'd ended things with me. Closed. The article said management restructuring, which was Manhattan code for failure dressed as opportunity. The memory of that night resurfaced. The glint of her watch, the sound of her voice when she said, different things. Maybe that restaurant was the perfect metaphor for her life now. Beautiful facade, poor foundation. By winter, my business had stabilized. I wasn't rich, but I was steady, something no luxury could replace. I learned to cook again, this time without rushing. My kitchen filled with the smell of basil, garlic, real food. On Fridays, I invited friends over, people who spoke plainly, who didn't measure worth in brands. Occasionally, I'd think about her, not the version in photos, but the one who used to fall asleep mid-sentence, head resting on my shoulder. That woman was gone, buried under ambition and applause. One night, around midnight, I got an email from an unknown address. The subject line was just her name. Inside, a short message: "I saw your website. It's beautiful. Congratulations." No signature, no invitation, no apology. Just that. I read it twice, then closed my laptop. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Over the next months, I noticed something interesting. The quieter I became, the more people listened. Silence had gravity. It drew truth toward it. Even she, somewhere out there, must have felt it, the absence that used to fill her world. I began keeping a small notebook. Not for feelings, but for clarity, short entries, lessons learned in stillness. Never chase explanations. They shrink you. Time exposes what words conceal. Luxury without peace is just decoration. I kept it by my bedside, next to a cheap digital clock that ticked without elegance but never lied. One evening, while packing for a business trip to Chicago, I found her old scarf in the closet, soft, gray, faintly scented with the past. For a moment I hesitated. Then I folded it, placed it in a donation box, and closed the lid gently. Closure doesn't need drama, just completion. As I turned off the lights, I caught my reflection in the window, not victorious, just still. It struck me how different stillness feels when it comes from strength instead of shock. I whispered to the empty room, not as a wish but as a truth. Time, not anger, will tell the truth. It started with whispers around her, the kind of gossip that moves through social circles like perfume. Faint at first, then clinging. A friend from the agency mentioned it over coffee. "She's not herself lately," he said, lowering his voice. "A little scattered. Missed deadlines. I think she's under pressure." I only nodded. It wasn't my business anymore, but the words lingered. Pressure has a way of revealing the cracks money can't seal. By then, my own life had settled into a quiet rhythm. The firm was small but thriving: late nights, honest clients, slow growth. I liked that. There was a kind of dignity in doing work no one clapped for but everyone needed. Each invoice paid, each satisfied client felt cleaner than any apology I could have received. Her world, though, was built on applause, and applause needs to be fed. She appeared on a lifestyle podcast one morning, talking about empowerment through self-branding. I listened for 3 minutes. Her voice was polished, distant, scripted. The host laughed too loudly, agreeing with every sentence. But beneath her confidence, I could hear it, that faint tremor, the sound of someone who knows she's selling more image than substance. A few weeks later, someone tagged her in a photo, an event in the Hamptons. The caption read, "Unbreakable energy." Except she didn't look unbreakable. The smile was thinner, the makeup heavier. The glass in her hand was half empty, and her eyes weren't on the camera. Maybe no one else noticed. I did. Around that time, winter hit the city hard. The kind that makes every streetlight look lonely. I spent most evenings in my office, working late, letting the radiator hum and the coffee go cold. There was peace in repetition. Outside, luxury stores still glowed like promises, but they no longer spoke to me. I'd learned that real freedom isn't about having everything. It's about not needing it. I ran into her by accident in February. I was meeting a client at a hotel downtown, one of those glass towers where the lobby smells like expensive air. As I stepped out of the elevator, she appeared from the bar, laughing too loudly at something a man said. When her eyes met mine, the laughter stopped mid-note. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The man, younger, confident, glanced between us, uneasy. She recovered quickly, introducing me with a brightness that didn't fit the moment. "This is Daniel," she said. "An old friend." Friend. That word landed like a blade dulled from overuse. She looked flawless, of course, tailored dress, gold earrings, the same Cartier watch glinting on her wrist. But the skin beneath her eyes told the real story. Sleep deprivation, maybe, or regret disguised as exhaustion. The man excused himself to take a call. The second he was gone, her expression changed. the mask lowering just enough for honesty to slip through. "You look good," she said quietly. "So do you," I replied. It was automatic, polite, meaningless. Then she asked, "Do you ever think about back then?" Her voice faltered slightly, a note of something human returning. I didn't answer right away. I wanted to, God, part of me wanted to, but words felt unnecessary. The silence between us said more than any explanation could. Finally, I said, "Sometimes, but not the way I used to." She smiled faintly, then glanced toward the hallway where the man had disappeared. When she looked back at me, I saw it. A flash of realization, the kind that comes too late. She knew the truth I had already learned. Luxury looks impressive from a distance, but up close it's just expensive noise. We parted with a handshake that felt like a curtain closing. Her palm was cold. Spring came. My business expanded to a second office. We hired 2 interns. I moved into a larger apartment, not for status, but for light. Meanwhile, her online presence began to shift. Fewer photos, longer captions. Gratitude turned to introspection. By May, she'd deleted most of her old posts. A few mutual friends said she was taking a break. That's Manhattan language for burnout. One evening, I opened a magazine while waiting for a client and found her name buried in a column. Something about organizational changes at her PR firm. The article was short, but between the lines, I could read it clearly. She'd been replaced. The watch that once symbolized success probably still ticked. But time had turned against her. I didn't celebrate. Her fall wasn't my victory. It was just confirmation that the universe still knew how to balance accounts. A few weeks later, she sent a message. Short, careful. "Could we talk sometime? No agenda. Just talk." I read it 3 times. My first instinct was curiosity, not hope. I typed, "Sure." Then I deleted it. Typed again, "Maybe another time," and sent that instead. Her reply came minutes later. "I understand." No dots, no follow-up. Just silence. That night, I stood by my window watching the lights of downtown flicker like nerves. Somewhere in that sea of windows was hers. Dimmer now, quieter. I wondered if she still poured champagne into crystal glasses, or if she drank straight from the bottle. Maybe she'd learned that luxury is lonelier when it stops being shared. In June, my company's first major feature appeared in an architecture magazine. Clean lines, practical beauty, the kind of praise that doesn't fade overnight. I didn't post about it. I didn't need to, but when I turned the page, I thought of her again. Not with anger, not even with nostalgia. Just with the detached compassion you feel for someone who finally understands what you tried to tell them long ago. I closed the magazine, poured myself a drink, and went out to the balcony. The city stretched beneath me, alive, restless, honest. Somewhere far below, a car alarm went off and then stopped. In the silence that followed, I realized something simple. Her collapse wasn't punishment. It was just gravity. Everything that rises too fast eventually remembers what it costs to stay up there. It happened 2 years after the night she walked away. By then, the city had changed its rhythm for me. I no longer looked up at glass towers with longing. I passed them like weather, something to notice, not to chase. My company had grown modestly steady. My days were predictable, my evenings quiet. Peace had texture now. Her name hadn't crossed my mind in months, until the invitation arrived. It was printed on heavy cream cardstock, embossed letters, the kind of design that screamed money trying to look effortless. Charity Gala, hosted by the Madison Foundation. Her name was on the committee list, near the bottom. I almost didn't go, but something told me I should. Closure, maybe, or the kind of symmetry life sometimes offers without being asked. The event was held in a Manhattan ballroom, all glass chandeliers and black suits. I arrived late, intentionally. The music was low, the crowd soft with alcohol and self-importance. And there she was, standing near the bar, in a silver dress that shimmered like liquid light. She looked almost the same except for her eyes. They were tired. Not puffy, not red, just dulled. Like the shine had been sanded down. When she saw me, she froze. For a heartbeat, everything else blurred. Then she smiled, small, genuine, uncertain. "Daniel," she said, stepping closer. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't either," I replied. We stood in the middle of the crowd, but it felt like no one else existed. The air between us carried all the words we'd never said. "You look," she began, then stopped. Like someone who sleeps, I said quietly. That made her laugh, not loudly, but honestly. For a moment, I saw the woman I used to love, the one before the ambition, before the glitter. Do you want to sit? She asked. We found an empty table in a corner, far from the cameras and the people who mattered. The waiter poured champagne. I declined. She didn't. How have you been? She asked, trying to sound casual, but her fingers trembled against the stem of the glass. Good, I said. Work steady. Life's quiet. She nodded, staring into the bubbles. Quiet sounds nice. There was a pause. Then she said, I owe you an apology. I didn't speak. The silence stretched, but not unkindly. She took a breath. When I left, I told myself I was choosing growth, that I needed to see what I could become. But it wasn't about growth. It was fear. I was scared of being ordinary, scared of losing before I'd even started. Her voice cracked slightly, but she kept going. And when people started noticing me, the clothes, the invitations, I mistook attention for love. I thought if enough people wanted me around, it meant I mattered. I looked at her. The perfection was still there, but the confidence that once held it together had thinned. Behind her eyes, I saw the exhaustion of someone who'd been performing for too long. I didn't leave because you weren't enough, she said. I left because I wasn't. That was the closest thing to truth I'd ever heard from her. I wanted to tell her it was okay, that I'd forgiven her. But forgiveness wasn't something I needed anymore. It had already happened quietly, like rust forming on a locked gate. She hesitated, then asked, Do you ever miss me? I thought of the old apartment, her hair on my pillow, the laughter that used to fill every corner. Then I thought of the silence that followed, and how it had taught me to breathe again. I miss who we were, I said, but not what we became. She nodded slowly, as if she'd expected that answer but hoped it would sound different out loud. Do you hate me? She asked. I shook my head. No. I stopped carrying that weight a long time ago. She exhaled, the kind of breath that sounds like surrender. I lost everything, you know? She whispered. The job, the condo, the people I thought were friends. When the money slowed, so did the attention. I kept pretending it was fine. But every night, the quiet got louder. There was a long silence between us, the kind that doesn't need filling. I looked at her and said quietly, You didn't lose love. You traded it for attention. Her eyes filled, steady and unblinking. And the attention ran out. A band started playing across the room, a slow jazz tune that made the chandeliers hum. She looked around, then back at me. You were right about everything. I never wanted to be right, I said. I just wanted to be seen. The conversation drifted after that, safer topics, lighter tones. But beneath every word was the weight of everything left unsaid. When she laughed, it was smaller now, more human. When she listened, it was real. At the end of the night, she stood. Can I see you again? There was no seduction in her voice, just hope, quiet, unpolished hope. I didn't answer immediately. I let the question hang in the air, between the clinking glasses and fading music. I think, I said finally, some things don't need a second ending. Her eyes glistened, but she smiled. Not bitterly, not brokenly. Just with the kind of understanding that only comes when you've lost too much to pretend anymore. She reached out, fingers brushing mine for a second. You found peace, she said softly. I can see it. I nodded. It's not something you find. It's something you stop fighting. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she whispered, I hope someday I stop fighting too. As she turned to leave, the crowd swallowed her. Sequins flashing, lights dimming. I watched until she disappeared completely. Then I sat back down, finishing the glass of water she'd left behind. The condensation had left a perfect ring on the tablecloth, like a faint echo of presence. Somewhere in the distance, a photographer's flash went off. Her world still needed proof of itself. Mine didn't. I stood, adjusted my jacket, and walked toward the exit. Outside, the night air was cool, honest. A thin rain began to fall, catching the glow of the streetlights. Across the avenue, a display window showed a mannequin wearing a gold watch, the same model as hers. Ticked behind the glass, perfect and meaningless. For the first time, I didn't look away. I simply turned my collar up, slipped my hands into my pockets, and stepped into the rain. Weeks passed before I thought about that night again. The gala, the music, her silver dress, all of it drifted into memory like the echo of a city I no longer lived in. She had looked beautiful, yes, but beauty wasn't power anymore. Not for her. Power, I'd learned, is silence that doesn't need to prove itself. After that evening, she didn't reach out. Not directly, but I noticed traces, a connection request, a new follower on the company page, a like on an old post. Subtle, almost hesitant gestures. It wasn't about rekindling anything. It was about being seen by the one person who no longer looked at her with desire or anger. Just truth. By spring, I moved offices again. A small space uptown with sunlight pouring through tall windows. My staff had grown, and the energy felt alive, grounded. The work wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. Each morning, I brewed coffee, opened the blinds, and started the day without noise. Peace, it turns out, is addictive once you taste it. One afternoon, I saw her again, by chance, or maybe fate doing its quiet loops. She was standing outside a cafe near Bryant Park, holding a paper cup, her phone pressed to her ear. The silver dress was gone, replaced by jeans and a sweater. For the first time, she looked reachable, human. When she noticed me, she froze for a second, then smiled. I waved. That was enough. Later that week, she texted, "Would you meet for coffee? Just to talk." I said yes. We met on a Sunday morning, no champagne, no lights, no audience. The cafe was quiet. She was already there when I arrived, hands wrapped around a mug like she was holding warmth she didn't trust to stay. "You look different," she said. "So do you," I replied. We both smiled, the kind that comes from acceptance, not nostalgia. "I left the PR firm," she said after a pause. "Too many performances. Too many people pretending to be alive while burning out in slow motion." Her tone was calm, not defensive, not proud, just factual. "I started freelancing," she added. "Smaller projects. Fewer eyes on me. It's quieter." "Quieter's good," I said. She nodded. "It is. I didn't realize how loud I'd let my life become." Outside, people passed by with umbrellas. The city felt slower, more forgiving. After a moment, she looked up. "That night at the gala, when you said I didn't lose love, I traded it for attention. I've thought about that a lot." I didn't respond. I wanted her to finish. She did. "You were right. The attention ran out. And when it did, I didn't even know who I was without it." Her voice didn't shake. It was steady, which somehow made it sadder. She looked at me. "I used to think love was something that made you glow. But it's not. It's something that makes you still." I nodded slowly. Still is better than shining. Shining burns too fast. A small silence passed. She smiled faintly. "You sound like someone who learned that the hard way." "I did," I said. "But it was worth learning." For the first time, she laughed. The kind of laughter that doesn't fill a room but warms it. It didn't feel like the beginning of something new. It felt like the end of something heavy finally being put down. When we left, she walked with me to the corner. The rain had stopped, and the air smelled clean. "Daniel," she said quietly, "I'm happy you're okay." "I'm more than okay," I said. "I'm free." She nodded. "I hope I get there too." "You will," I said. "But you'll have to stop chasing the noise." We parted there, no promises, no unfinished gestures. Just a calm understanding that some stories don't need to be rewritten. They just need to end with dignity. That evening, I returned to my apartment. On the shelf behind me sat the small notebook where I'd written my lessons months ago. I opened it to the last page and added one more line. Maybe the cost of pretending was higher than the price of losing me. I closed it gently. The page crinkled slightly under my palm, a sound softer than closure, but stronger than peace. Outside, the streets were wet, reflecting the light from passing cars. Somewhere in that reflection, the man I used to be disappeared, and the one I'd become remained. I didn't need revenge anymore. I didn't even need forgiveness. The difference between us was enough. Her chasing mirrors, me walking through open air. And for the first time in years, I realized the truest kind of power isn't being wanted. It's being untouched by what once broke you. Summer came back around almost exactly 3 years since she left. One morning, as I walked to the office, I passed a storefront I hadn't noticed before. Behind the glass, they were selling vintage watches. Old ones, scratched, imperfect, still ticking. I stopped for a moment, looking at them. The gold Cartier model was there too, but this one had a cracked crystal and a faint rust line around the clasp. For a second, I almost smiled. My business was running on its own rhythm now. The younger designers handled most of the work. I focused on mentoring, on seeing things grow without forcing them. The quiet routine that once felt like loneliness had become structure. Peace wasn't absence anymore, it was presence. Sometimes, she crossed my mind. Not as a wound, not even as a memory. More like a song you recognize from another room. Familiar, but no longer yours. Then, one Friday evening, an email arrived. No subject line. No greeting. Just a single sentence. I'm leaving New York. Under it, a short note. Thank you for being the only part of my past that still feels real. I read it once, then again slower. There was no attachment, no plea, no forward address. Just honesty, stripped of decoration, finally. I closed the message and sat back, letting the stillness settle. For years I'd wondered what her ending would look like. Now I didn't need to imagine it. She had chosen movement, maybe escape, maybe rebirth. It didn't matter. Everyone deserves a second silence. That weekend, I drove out to the coast, no destination, just motion. I parked near a small cafe by the pier and ordered coffee. When the cup arrived, I realized I'd stopped thinking about who else might have been sitting across from me. The chair opposite was empty, and it didn't ache anymore. I watched the tide pull against the rocks, steady, patient, certain. That's how life should move, I thought. Not in waves of noise, but in rhythm with its own weight. Somewhere behind me, a couple argued softly about directions. Their voices faded as they laughed. For the first time, I felt something close to gratitude. For every wrong turn, every silence, every moment that had forced me to stand still long enough to understand what staying means. I finished my coffee and left a tip beneath the cup, a small circle of warmth on the table where my hand had been. Back in the city, I placed the small notebook, my quiet ledger of lessons, into a drawer. I didn't need to write in it anymore. But before closing it, I added one final line at the bottom of the last page. I no longer need her to understand. The silence is enough. The words sat there, unadorned, final but kind. I turned off the light, opened the window, and let the sounds of the street drift in, footsteps, laughter, the endless heartbeat of New York. The city kept moving like time does without apology. And I stood there, breathing it in. Not as someone left behind, but as someone who had finally caught up with himself.